record on this computer. This is Zoom class number 4, Constellation training, 2019-20, January 7th. We've got everyone except for Dinka, and God bless Dinka for even thinking about trying to make it. But it's 3 a.m. in Bulgaria. And I don't know how much, maybe I never know if you guys are communicating more with each other than you are with me, but she is apparently dealing with trying to get care for her father who is dealing with prostate cancer. So I said, I am not expecting you this evening. I mean, I often, when I sign up for webinars on the other side of the planet, and it means getting up late or something, I have really good intentions. And then that sleep cycle thing hits, and I'm just forget about it. See you later. It just isn't very realistic. Usually, some people are quite tough and they do it. Anyway, hello everybody. Good to see you. Good to see you. Judith is packing. She is here. She is listening. But she's apparently like going out the door at 4 in the morning or something. So she may show up a little bit from time to time. So don't say anything bad about Judith because she's listening. Not that we have anything
what could we possibly have to say?
Okay. Yes, Kelly.
I just wanted to say I can't find my power cable, so I'm going to be listening, but I'm going to be looking around my house for my power cable because otherwise I'm going to lose connection.
Okay.
So just so you know what's going on. I haven't ditched. Okay.
Any other explanations people have to deliver about their participation tonight? Anna, it's good to have you back. Welcome back.
Thanks.
So just check in. How are people? Are you continuing? I know the holidays are mega busy. Probably put a lot of stuff on hiatus. You guys still meeting at all? What's arising? Questions? How are people?
We did meet. This was the week where it was hard for us all to get together. It's frozen. There you are, you're back.
Yeah, I thought I had this problem fixed. And, the webinar actually froze a bunch of times earlier today, so I'm gonna have to talk to Zoom again. So I may freeze, but it does seem to come back within like 3 or 4 or 5 seconds. So just wait when you see me go, because from my point of view, you all freeze.
Right.
Anyway,
so we did meet. Some of us met last week, and Anna had experienced a kind of constellation that we were curious about, so we all tried it together and learned some things. So we are still meeting, although holidays made it hard.
Yeah. Any questions arise or dilemmas or miracle cures that you want to share? Huh? How are people? Is it anything people want to say about feeling fatigued or out of sync with being here tonight, or all your shit is up, or whatever it might be, or again something marvelous?
I always feel out of sync. So I just got back from Chicago yesterday.
Oh,
my time clock's still a little off. I was working remotely so I could spend more time with the family, nephews and stuff. But I'm here. I'm really frustrated that my power cable has gone. So I apologize for that. So I'll be, but I am here and I am listening and I'm super happy. I'm sorry. And I also missed the practices just because this vacation was like super like intense with family visits, and I think I'm a little emotionally exhausted from that, but in a good way. So that's about where I'm at.
Got it. Good. Anna, what is the Constellation thing you experienced that you shared with people?
I just went to Constellation evening with my friend, and somebody wanted to have a spontaneous constellation. It was about it was she was talking about like, how do you say that, life that before her life, other the last life she had or something.
Yeah.
So, and it was interesting because in Karen, what she made out of it was she set her up and a life that is influencing her the most in her present life.
Yeah.
So, and that was really interesting.
Was that in LA?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, she got it from Gary Stewart. Pretty sure, because Gary Stewart, that's exactly what Gary Stewart did. And he's been doing it for probably 10 years now. I'd be very interested to hear how it went for you guys, because after I had a marvelous time doing that with Gary Stewart, and I thought, I'm going to do this when I get home. This is great. And then I went home and I set up a workshop on past lives, and they were train wrecks. I cannot tell you. They were people were really mad at me. They were really bad. And what I realized is, remember what I've said, the orders of love are different for different systems. And they're not quite the same for past lives as they are for families. And I couldn't quite feel for what made a proper resolution. It's just different. And it was perfectly fine when I was a client and on the receiving side from Gary, who's like past lives is kind of, he's very woo-woo. He's very metaphysical. He's very into all that stuff. And it was all very solid work, and it was great. But in my hands, it was oh dear. So I didn't do it again, and I won't do it again. Just because, it's worthwhile trying things and then noticing, oh, it's not my strength. And that's fine. That's good. So how did it go for the study group to practice it?
You want to talk about it, Grace?
Yeah. Well, I was just opening my mouth to say, I'll make one reflection and you guys add too. Part of why it engaged us is we were thinking about what happens when a client brings up something that you feel a little bit like, so we appreciated the particular take on it rather than, because the client had come with I have a certain past life where XYZ, like I was Cleopatra, like something where you're sort of like, Anyway, this seemed like an interesting way to engage with that by just calling forth whatever was most important rather than thinking we knew what it was.
Right.
And then when we tried it, I was surprised by was what a resource our past lives were. Like it ended up being, two of us did it and they were shorter and all we did was a kind of MRI, not trying to resolve anything, just like, let's just see what's going on with the past life that has the biggest impact on me. And it was sweet, which I was really surprised by.
That's nice.
At least for myself, I was surprised. So, and they felt like resources, like they ended up behind us and we felt this like beaming of love and, different things like handing off the heart. And, like there was all kinds of good stuff happened.
That's great. Yeah. No, I could see just as doing as a dyad with that sort of general, the most influential or the one I'm supposed to look at now or however you kind of want to put it. The way I ended up doing it as inherited from Gary Stewart was someone has like a regular constellation, they have an issue. So my depression or my inability to find a partner or whatever, stuff like that. And then we look at the past life that's most related to that specific problem as opposed to my life in general. And then we ended up with all of kind of the pain around that, as we do in constellations, but without a firmer sense of what would look like a resolution. I had 5 people, and I remember 2 people had great resolutions, and one person had that was fine, and 2 people were like it just would not resolve. It just wouldn't, and they were getting really cranky with me, truly. But that's a good question, Grace, because it happens for me as well. It is not that uncommon that clients will say, you know, I've got this problem, and I think it's related to a past life, because that's a frame that a lot of people around here have. And you can decide what you guys want to do with that. What I do is I say, that's really possible. You know, sort of ancestral stuff and past life stuff tends to mirror each other. And past lives are not my expertise. Ancestry is, so that's where we're going to stay, okay? And they go, okay, that sounds good. So that's just how I work with it in terms of when it arises with clients. But you all are free to make a different decision and to play with it and see if you have, I mean, especially if any of you really feel like you've studied and have some expertise in a spiritual framework that takes incarnation and past lives seriously, and you understand in some sense what the rules are around that, then I would say go for it. Give it a try. See what happens. And I'm glad you guys did it. That's great. That's awesome. Yeah.
Anna, did you want to, it was your idea. Did you notice anything you wanted to add?
No. No, irgendwie, but like you said, irgendwie, I think, ich meine, I think in the constellation, actually, where I was, it was in that the issue, the way that you said it, Leslie, that the issue was related in relation to the past life, that they did it with the issue. And then, but not going into, it was like Grace said, it was really good. Because the client was talking a lot and describing this past life and so, and that was it was so refreshing when Karen just said, okay, then let's do this, and
smart.
Not going into for all of us, and also I think also for people who were there and who not really relate to a past life. So it was like a very good solution, I thought, because that was something everybody could accept.
Yeah. And that's really interesting. That's a really good example of pace, lead.
Mm-hmm.
So the facilitator, you know, basically mirrored the client's values without necessarily staying in the particularly kind of hyper-focused, slightly obsessive place that they were, you know, focused in on. Because the facility, I mean, even the way you're telling it, I can tell it probably wasn't useful for her. You know, this whole, this past life and you know, it's like, oh, well. So that's a great pace lead. Really, really, really nice. And I still probably would have said, that's really awesome, but I can't do that. Because I don't try and pretend to do things I can't do well. And I'd get myself down a hole around past lives, and then we'd be on our way. And I really like her solution. That's really nice. Anything else anyone wants to ask about or share before I dive into some of our topics for the evening?
Okay, I was just gonna check in a little. I'm good. I missed their training because that was like just right after the holidays, and I have been working pretty much every day for ski season at the mountain during Christmas. But I'm doing better than average, I would say.
Okay.
Yay!
Better than average is great.
Yeah. Good.
Awesome. Okay, good.
Oh, and I was able to watch the recording of your guys' thing earlier today because I missed it, but it's cool.
Some guy's thing.
What
Oh,
Your
recording?
thing, your thing, Leslie.
the thing today.
You're with Susie Tucker and Jane Peterson.
Okay, good. Yeah, that was very sweet. Nice. I love those two women. They are fabulous people. Okie dokies, artichokes.
Can I check in quickly?
Sure.
Hi, guys. I'm really happy to see all of you. And Kelly, haven't seen you in a long time. And Serena, I'm doing really well. I'm heading off to New York tomorrow morning. I have a music conference on the weekend, and then I'm going to see a couple of marvelous plays and concerts. And my sister's going to come down from New Hampshire for a couple days, and old friends. And I've calmed down about an hour and a half ago. I just felt like I was going at 1,000 miles an hour. It just was pretty darn silly. But yeah, just lots of love and excitement. After the workshop today, I actually signed up for the intensive.
Sure did.
And I'd be delighted to see anybody else in this group there.
Well, Kelly signed up.
Oh, awesome.
Yep.
Awesome, Kelly. Oh, I'm so happy to know that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to packing, but I am listening, and I love all of you.
Love you.
Bye.
Okie dokies, artichokes. Where does that one come from? I haven't said that in a long time. I don't know. It's a good one, though. Okay, so today I want to talk a little bit. So for this last chunk, what we're mostly in is we're out of kind of principles and themes and theory and basic principles like healing sentences and entanglements and stuff like that. And we're into more like formats, non-family type constellations, just kind of like opening up the field more and more of like what's out there and what you'll commonly run into, including past life constellations. Got a few things I want to run through this evening, and we'll do some practice as well, okay? So first I want to, and all of these, by the way, are things we've already been doing and even talking about a little bit, but now I want us to, I'm going to bring it up explicitly for you so that you can work with it explicitly. So the first topic is ritual constellations. This is just a distinction I make. I think it's kind of out there, but I'm not sure how much. And Grace, we just lost your face for what it's worth. I don't know if that matters while I'm talking.
I was thinking I had a halo, but
Yeah. Yeah, when there's a strong bright light right behind you, I do not see you anymore. Ritual constellations, so the conventional constellation that we see, we set up representatives and we see what happens, right? Information comes through, oh, she's been left out, or he's done something wrong, or, you know, we start getting information, and it takes a little time, and we ask the representatives what they're experiencing, da-da-da-da. Ritual constellations are, in a sense, the opposite of that. It's stuff we set up, but and the language I'm using, it's not out there, but I've got to give things labels, is the first kind I'm calling kind of like open field constellations versus ritual constellations, which is really setting up elements in a sense to be able to explore or demonstrate a principle or a dynamic in kind of a small chunk kind of a way. Now, most all constellations include ritual elements, and I'll say more about that in a moment. However, ritual constellations on their own can be really useful for workshops or teaching about constellations, stuff like that. You set up the elements and you ask the group to do a more or less set series of actions. The interesting thing is that even though it's set up and you're telling them what to do, they're still having systemic responses, right? So if I set up two of you right now and one to just be a generic victim and one to be a generic perpetrator, you would start feeling the energies of victims and perpetrators, right? It just happens because there's meaning fields around this stuff, and our bodies and our minds and spirits are set up to receive them. This is a little bit of what Jane was talking about today for those of you who were on the webinar. Yeah, our bodies are just know how to, feel the victim field or feel the perpetrator field. And so some examples that you've seen or we've talked about, I'm pretty sure we did this in the class. You may not remember it because I think it may be a while ago, but I put you all in a line and I gave the person in back a heavy thing. This I got from William Mannell. And the ones in the back are the later ancestors, and they pass the burden forward to the people in front. And the people in front were saying, I can see that's heavy for you. Let me take that for you. Yeah. And then we pass it back with, and everyone could feel it. It's a really good teaching constellation. It's it's a really good constellation for, put aside teaching, just have people to begin to feel the field of what we call entanglement. That's what it is, right? It's a way to start feeling what entanglement is in your body. And it's so awesome. Inevitably, as the heavy object is being passed down towards the front or being taken from the back by the ones in front, everyone's like going, no, I don't want to do this. This sucks. I don't want to. And you're like, listen, just cooperate. I promise I'm not going to leave it like this, but everyone's feeling the field, and the objections are so useful, right? For later on in the workshop when you say, well, that thing in that ritual, you're doing it with your mom, you see? Oh, shit. It's, people can make the connections. Having said that, because there's no such thing as a fully closed system, like the only full system is the whole universe, right? Organic open dynamics can arise. Yeah. So I remember very clearly when I participated in that ritual for the first time, I happened to be the person in front, and the person behind me was not a generic parent. It was my mother. And all of a sudden I was having this little mini constellation with my mother, and I had it and I didn't want to give it back. And Bill was just saying, listen, just do what I tell you to do. Just please, right? So a personal constellation was arising, and that's inevitable, right? And so the question is, as facilitator, are you going to stick with the ritual as it is? Or are you going to allow the new field information to arise? And this is something that will very frequently happen in little mini constellations that you set up, little dyads and triads. You think you're just going to send them off to experience a really simple little dynamic, and then all of a sudden, like, one of them is on the floor and they're flopping, and you're like, oh shit, this was supposed to be simple, right? So, and someone's sobbing, and you're like, oh, I think I have to deal with this. So that's what happens, right? Um, so you're gonna have to be really clear with yourself about what the limitations are and really clear with the group. So Bill got a little firm with me and he said, I understand this is going on between you and your mother, but would you just please do the ritual as I've told you? Oh, okay, I can do that. And I did, right? Or not. He could have decided to change gears and work with that if he wanted to, but that wouldn't have served the purposes of his workshop very well. And I actually that actually sort of kickstarted some stuff for me that I was able to deal with later in the workshop. So there are common constellation ritual movements in ordinary constellations. I bet you could think of a half dozen without trying too hard. What are really common movements that you see all the time in constellations? I think Kelly said bowing, but she was muted. Right? And there's different kinds of ritual bows, right? Depending upon the situation. But yeah. What else?
Just acknowledging what is, acknowledging a relationship or whatever.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Handing things off.
Handing things off. Yeah. Anna, I think you're about to say something.
Just all the healing sentences, right?
Yeah, all the stock ones
Mm-hmm.
are kind of ritual. Yeah. Grieving the dead. Yeah.
Also, the ritualized positions of people and having elders behind behind the current person and the father on the right, mother on the left, those positions.
Yeah, so you're doing this stuff all the time. And you're using these ritual movements because they're deeply archetypal. And they just show up again and again and again across family systems, yeah? They're part of the orders of love. It is important to feel when there are exceptions arising. I mean, they just do, you know, like Judith was just sharing the standard placements of the parents, but sometimes they're reversed. And everyone feels better when they're reversed. And you have to kind of double check, like, really? Is this not a disorder? And everyone just goes, no, this is best. Okay. You know? A few other small exercise examples I wanted to give. In the last residency, we talked about two lines of people, one on the floor, one standing up, and on the ones on the floor reaching up to the parents. It's another nice little exercise. We talked last time about recovering male and female lineages, which you've asked me to do for the next one. So we'll do that. That's going to be a good example, probably, of a ritual having open field elements arise, because it's very hard to keep that one purely generic. As soon as you put a person and their lineage in, some of the particulars of that lineage start to show up. It's kind of hard to avoid. Francesca Mason-Boring has a really nice one. If we have time, we might do it, where when she has a whole room, she's recovering the immigration journey, so that any way in which there's immigration trauma in families, in which there almost always is in the United States, to resolve it. She has an area that's called the boat, and everyone has to start on the boat, and then slowly they have to move to the land and complete the journey. And so that in some sense in their own systems, like, they can finally arrive. This can be extremely powerful. Yeah, I once you can think of things for like large auditoriums. Francesca did an amazing one with a group of 250 people, and it was actually better because it was that many people. sitting in rows at a conference where she just said, everybody who is an actual immigrant, you came to the United States, stand up. So a certain number of people stood up, and then, the people whose parents came, would you stand up, please? And some more people stood up. And the people who it was your grandparents, would you stand up? They stood up. And she kept on using this language of just acknowledging the journey that these people took. And by the end, of course, everyone's standing up, including anyone with Native American history. She had a way of languaging that. And I was like, this is beautiful. All these journeys. We don't acknowledge these friggin' journeys. We don't acknowledge them. It's very powerful stuff. So you can really use this stuff to really good advantage. So I'm not going to do a ritual constellation here today because we're going to be doing one at the residency. We've done them before. But any questions about ritual constellations?
I do.
Sure.
When you set one up, you have an intention of what you're trying to. Yeah.
Some important dynamic. And the more exposure you get, the more books you read, the more trainings you go to, whatever, you'll get little things. Like I said today in the webinar today, you said you watched it. Jane's little exercise was a really good exercise for explaining constellations to a new group. Steal it, use it if it resonates with you. So yeah, and yes, you can create your own as well. How would I do a ritual to acknowledge and include the perpetrators in the family? Right? That sort of thing. That's just, so then you start thinking, okay, well, I probably need, this and this and this. Yeah. Then you might practice it a little bit by yourself, see what happens. Yeah. And, as soon as I said that, I thought, oh, I probably wouldn't do that as a ritual because perpetrator is already a pretty intense word. And ritual ones, you kind of, you don't want to go for the jugular in a ritual.
So would you go for like something like supporters in the family, or?
You might, yeah.
Like
where are the unnoticed supports or strengths or resources in the family? And what does that movement look like? What is it what's the dynamic of that you that you want to reveal? Yeah, sure. I can see Judith creating one that has to do with singing. That would be pretty cool. Yeah. Okay. Okie dokies. And again, these are not firm categories, but it's useful to kind of know you can do this. And it can be extremely helpful in a really heightened, heavy, difficult constellation to bring in a really simple, basic ritual. It can really soothe the system. Yeah. I had a really nice email. I'm not sure. I think Grace and Kelly, you guys left the second constellation at the last constellation night where we did a constellation for a young son rather than an adult son who was having sleeping phobias and just having a hard time of it, this kid. And I just got an email from the mother saying he's slept through the night every night since the Constellation. And I'm like, oh, yay, so sweet. But it ended up being all about the parents were never married and were not a couple anymore. So that's already an issue for the kid. But on top of that, the father's Jewish and was not in strong relationship with his lineage. So just the rituals around father getting in touch with his lineage and really honoring and including it, and then the child being able to see his father reconciled with his lineage and connected with them. Sorry, I think I just froze for a sec. But
That's awesome, Leslie. I was actually there. I did the.
Oh, you were there.
The mom.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. And then and the mother witnessing her, the father going through all this. And I could tell, at first, there's a lot of resistance to like giving the father a break. And then it relaxed and relaxed and relaxed until she could allow the son to really have his father, which was what he was really needing. So it was really quite nice, and a kind of almost a bunch of little rituals. It's also really useful what we had that night, which was not a lot of representatives. So we don't have a lot of different complex players, but a few simple dynamics, few simple relationships. Okay, so the next topic is using transpersonal elements. And by that I mean things like angels, God, guiding elements of various kinds, or things that I might just call like the spirit of safety. Just generally non-human representations. So the first thing I want to say about these is sometimes the client's issue explicitly asks for it, like they feel like they're out of touch with their soul, and that's exactly the way they've put it, or their purpose, or their life mission, or things like that. In which case, by all means, of course, bring these kinds of elements in. But the first thing I'm going to start out with is like a warning. Watch out for bypasses. I think the singular strength of Constellation's work is dealing with specific entanglements, losses, exclusions. And once we start bringing in angels, say, as a way to bring some strength and support into the family, we may have missed an opportunity to strengthen the family by finally acknowledging the perpetrator, or by finally mourning the loss of the elder brother, or by finally facing the truth of the Cherokee Walk of Tears, or whatever it is. We want to be careful that we're not sort of playing into the systemic pressure to continue to exclude things. My teacher used to call it the white light bypass. Right? And it's one of the complaints around New Age religions in general is, it's very 8th chakra. It's very all about the white light and spirituality and God and whatnot. And like all the embodied stuff is just, right? So just notice why you're bringing these elements in, okay? Again, if the client explicitly states these elements, then by all means, you got to bring them in, right? Beyond that, beyond, the specific outcome the client wants, I use these when I feel the emotional tenor of the situation requires assistance past the resources of the family. They need something with a higher pay grade. So the example I often use, this is where I really sort of got this, was, and I think I've mentioned this story to this group, but it's worth remembering. I had a client with a family where there was a particularly terrible murder of an infant that was just horrible. And I did all of the moves, you know, including the child, bringing in the parents to mourn it, bringing in the perpetrator, all this stuff. And the distress in the system would not abate, both in the victim and in the client, who was clearly entangled with all this. It just, I mean, I was doing everything. I was not bypassing. I was dealing with the actual systemic issues. And it was good, but it wasn't relieving anything. And so I was sitting there and going, what do I don't, and I just finally, it's almost like the family turned to me and said, we can't do this. This is too big and too hard for us. And so I brought in like 6 representatives to represent, you know, transpersonal elements, angels, whatever you want to call them, that could see what the family could not. That was the language I used. Who could see what the family we should not be able to expect the family to be able to see this. And the minute I brought those 6 in, everyone finally went, oh, it's okay now. It's like, this is fine. I mean, the victim settled because the victim could be seen. And the rest of the family settled because there wasn't this pressure for them to see what they couldn't see. And the client, I mean, just the whole room went, phew. Huh. Yeah. I do this when, again, like it's kind of an exceptional level of trauma energy, pain, anxiety, that isn't getting much relief. I will sometimes do this on the front end for a client I'm experiencing as particularly fragile in a story that's particularly fraught. I'll just, like, if in the circle, when I start out, I'll just, you know, could 5 people raise your hands? Great. From your seats, I'm giving you a role, which is, and then I'll come up with something that matches what's going on, but something like, you are the representations of the divine spirit of safety in the family. And you don't have anything else to do for the rest of the constellation. I just want you to do that starting now. And then I'm kind of setting, it's like an extra container. And the client really appreciates that. I mean, especially if the interview I've done with them is being done kind of in a state of alarm. Yeah, it's just like, oh, that's nice. Yeah, okay. Let's dive in. Also, it is a good way to connect with deep, culturally appropriate spiritual traditions in the family. Again, I'm a geek about these things. I tend to know a lot about religious traditions around the world, but you don't have to know. You can just inquire with the client. But when it is relevant to the family, it's really, really nice. About 1.5 years ago, I had a client who had a lot of judgment about his family, his lineage, who were Iranian Christians, really interesting old Christian lineage. And of course, I'm an Episcopal priest, so I know my church history. And I knew these were the Martomas, who are, the understanding is it was founded by St. Thomas. And this is, they place a lot of importance on being some of the first Christians, like the oldest like lineage of Christians in the world. And so I brought in St. Thomas into the constellation. This was fabulous. And this guy is not Christian. He's more, I don't know, Buddhist or something. I don't remember. He ended up getting this blessing from St. Thomas, and it was just, and it put him in rapport with his family to have this. So, I wouldn't stick St. Thomas into just anybody's constellation. But in this one, it was quite appropriate. If I'm doing one for Jewish people, I might refer to the angels as seraphim, because, that's traditional language. I've brought into Jewish ones the Shekinah, which is the spirit of God and in the wind that followed the Moses and the people through the desert. So if you can find these things in people's traditions, either in their own particular spirituality or in their lineage, it can be very helpful. Like if they're Irish folk, I had a great one where I brought in Saint Bridget, who's a really, really, really important Irish saint, who's based on a pagan figure, pre-Christian Celtic figure. So it was very deep and very beautiful, and it's, was feminine, and it was great. So when these are relevant and useful, because it gets people into rapport with their family systems, this sense of connecting with something really deep and really old, and the way their people have been praying for a really long time, even if that's not how they pray now. Obviously, as Grace will tell us, when it comes to the Roman Catholic Church, one has to be careful. But again, there are deeper strains, even in that often people can find a way to connect with. That's really, really lovely. Okay. A few other things I want to say about this. There are a few other categories of transpersonal elements. Curses. Working with curses. Every once in a while, you'll get someone who comes from a family background. This is often immigrants who feel like they're dealing with a family curse. I don't know if they're real or not, but the meaning in the field is real, and you can work with it. So, you put in a representation for the curse, and you go on the hunt for the first person who placed it. And usually what ends up happening is you end up revealing that, the person, the great grandmother who laid a curse on her husband, and it's been going on ever since, or whatever, she was actually the victim, right? So there are these wonderful turnarounds, and the curse ends up to being a blessing, and, all that, sort of changing the narrative of the family. It's really, it's interesting stuff to work with. Entities. I'm making a face because entities are not my favorite thing in the world. Does everyone know what I mean when I say entities? Raise your hand if you would like a sentence or two on entities. Okay. Entities are a thing in certain metaphysical circles. Some of the people I've hung out around with, you will eventually get a client who says, my problem is I have entity attachments. They happen every once in a while. Just like, Anna, you were saying, the person came in saying, I know my problem, it's this past life, people will come in and say, whoop, I've frozen. Okay, when I notice I've frozen, I try to stop for a moment until it comes back. So an entity, the idea out there is that they're shards of consciousness. So when someone dies, say suddenly or exceptionally tragically, or for some reason, it's hard for them to know that they have died, sort of thing. Some aspect of their consciousness goes floating around until it lands on somebody. And then it hangs out. And when we have an entity, we just think it's part of ourselves because that's what it feels like. That depression or that phobia or that compulsion, it's often around compulsions and obsessions. The idea is that it's not us, it's the entity, and that what we need then is an entity release. I am completely agnostic about whether entities are real or not. Here's what I know working with, doing a lot of entity work, is if people come in claiming that their problem is entities, I tend to think they aren't. I tend to think that this is a bypass to not deal with something else. That it's a way to avoid the real issue. Now, obviously, I do pace, lead, and I work with that in some way. But when someone's claiming that an entity attachment is their problem, I'm usually on the lookout for a pretty garden variety entanglement. You know, they're identifying with the lost brother or the grandmother or the whatever. Every once in a while, though, there's this about 2 or 3 times a year, I am presented in a constellation with something that I just have to surrender and I have to work with like it's an entity. Because it's just, it's the only thing that works. Yes.
But couldn't that just be their understanding, and couldn't the entity be their dead father? Or, like, it could still be, you know what I'm saying? Like, it still could be, right? Because it sounds kind of like a soul retrieval kind of situation, like the split of consciousness and like, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
I sort of. Let me explain a little bit more about what I do with entities, and then you'll see the distinction a little bit.
Okay.
No, it's a good question. Because people have that thought. They come with, I have some part of my grandmother in me, right? Well, yes, we have this framework called entanglements, and you bow to her and her suffering, and you give back to her her suffering, and don't you feel better now? And it can feel like that kind of release, right? It can feel like an entity release. But the difference is, in a real entity attachment, we're not actually including. This is the difference. In a real entity attachment, we want the entity to go away because it does not belong in the system. Okay? And nothing works in the constellation until I give up trying to figure out the entanglement and acknowledge that this is something like an entity attachment that needs some kind of respectful withdrawal from the system. Okay. So this is usually when an abstract representation like depression or poverty, or even a spontaneous recruitment in the room and you don't know what it is. Sometimes they'll say that they only showed up to help. They want to be helpful. This is often what entity attachments do. Or something feels transmitted over many, many, many generations, and it just feels like it doesn't belong. Now, I cannot, this is a gray area. Mostly, the default is to find a way to make this stuff belong and include, and if it doesn't work, then try the other and see what happens. Has anyone been in the room when I've done, because I know I did one maybe 3 or 4 months ago where I had something leave the room. Was anyone,
That seems familiar.
that sounds
I don't,
familiar,
I
Grace?
don't remember it clearly though.
I don't remember it either, but I do know it was pretty recent, recent-ish, like 3
I
or 4.
think I remember that.
Yeah.
It was in Oakland at Rudderman Deer when I was there, that first residency, and the perpetrators, a sexual abuser, the father had to leave, right?
Yeah. The father stayed, but this entity thing left. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was that. So for all of you who came that first night of the first residency, saw this. And addiction often feels like this to me. Feels like, it's a lineage, like everyone's an alcoholic, or the sort of thing. And again, it's like it's like transpersonal elements. I don't assume this first, but after a while, it's like, oh. And the goal with this is to get some sense of the entity, and you just say, what are you experiencing? What's going on? I'm just trying to be helpful. I really love her and care for her, and I like keeping her company. And I've been around a long time, that sort of thing. And then in traditional entity release, what you want to do is have the entity leave on its own volition, and also the volition of everybody else in the room, because often there's some it's been accompanying the client for a long time, so it can feel like a loss when it goes away. And the idea is that there's actually a more appropriate set of belongings for this entity than the family or the person it's found itself with. Yeah, Kelly.
Is the entity always like related to the family somehow? I mean, is it usually like, if we're talking ghosts or whatever, like?
If it's a family ghost, it's a grandma or a grandpa, and they belong. Right? I mean, the ghost is another word to talk about what we do all the time, right? Ancestral representations. This is something that really doesn't belong in the system. They've gotten mixed up. One framework is that when we're very, very young and we're in enormous pain as a result of a terrible situation going on around us, and some cry for help goes out to the universe, yeah, and then some shard of consciousness that needs a place to land goes and comes in. That's one framework for this. Doesn't belong with us. It was all meant to be helpful, and it was all volitional, but it's causing havoc now. And it belongs with a different system, wherever it got split off from.
How do you send it back where it's going to be better off?
So what you, just for a moment, Kelly, I'm just going to role model that you're representing an entity in the system. And I'll just say, yeah, I know you've been with these people, but I wonder if there's people you prefer. And then I would have Anna represent the people you actually belong to and put them somewhere else so that you have a chance to go, oh, I miss them. Yeah. And slowly, with usually a very nice goodbye to the client system, because they've been company for a long time. And there's a goodbye involved and a thank you. Yeah. And then I have both the entity represented by Kelly and whom the entity belongs to, or the people they belong to, represented by Anna, join and walk together out the door. And the instruction I actually give to the representatives is in a moment, I'm going to ask you to leave the room and just do that really quietly and gently. Close the door behind you, have a moment, and then step out of the roles, come back as yourselves. Okay. And that usually goes really, really, really nicely. And all of a sudden the room feels just like, I remember from that night, particular Serena and Grace, I remember after we did it, everybody in the room went like, oh, I just got sober. Like the whole room, it just cleared up. And then I could go on with the more conventional resolutions, which were coming much more easily now. So I don't want to I'm going to stop talking about this because this is something you're going to do very, very rarely, but I did want to mention it. And if you don't believe in entities, then forget all this. But I have found that every once in a while, it's what the client system is bringing up for me. And it's always I sit down and I go, shit, I hate entities. And I don't hate entities. When you meet somebody who really believes in entities, I tend to feel like I'm a little bit in the presence of crazy, which is why it always makes me a little has a lot of attention and focus on entities. It's always a little unnerving for me because I've noticed it become a frame of kind of explaining everything, and it's not how I see them. But every once in a while, it does seem to be what's needed. Okay. Other things that we can bring in, very, very classically, life and death. You can bring in life by itself when the interrupted reach is generalized into being an interrupted reach for life. I think by now you've all seen this. And then at the end, we bring in life, and the client can do a reach up. We get especially the life up on a chair, so the person can really reach up and embrace life. It can also be really, really helpful. I'm not sure how much we've done this, but very frequently when there are extremely tragic deaths, we get entangled with the dead, and then life and death gets really blurred and confused. This is kind of a ritual movement of, I am dead and you are alive, or I am alive and you are dead, with the brother or the, right? Or the war buddy who died, these kinds of things. And to have on one side life with the living and on the other side death with the dead. And it's extremely clarifying for everybody. Yeah. And to have and sometimes a living person goes over to the side with the dead. And you're like, oh, well, now I know it. Like, okay, I understand what's out of order here. How shall we address this, right? Some mourning for someone who died or whatever, yeah. And then these Hellinger sentences that we've heard, someday I will join you, but not for a while. Please bless me as I stay here for a while. And the dead say, of course. And it can be very nice in many instances, like if there's a particular dead person who had a tragic death that's had a lot of attention on it, to have other dead so that the living can see that they have company. It's really nice. Yeah. It's a great relief. So these are some of the ways in which we can bring in a variety of transpersonal elements. Also, there are soul level constellations, and the good news is through the good work of your fellow students, we did this last residency. So you've seen some of what this can be like. Yep. It is very interesting stuff to explore. Me and my higher self. If you have different aspects like, the Freudian ego, superego, and id, you know, you can look at these things, different aspects of self. Yeah. As well as, of course, what we started talking out about past life constellations. I do not recommend you mix past lives and ancestral lives. That sounds like a mess. Keep them in separate constellations. Okie dokie. So here's what I would like to do. Oh, well, first, any questions about all that? So there's a lot of opportunities here. Yeah. Okay. And you know, most of the stuff you've seen now. Okay. One way or another. Okay. So what I want to do now, I remember years ago reading Don Juan, who here has read Carlos Castaneda. People of a certain age, Grace.
True.
Have read the Carlos Castaneda books, but I remember the teaching of Don Juan, which is to Carlos, is to keep death at his left shoulder. Yeah, just and that's a very old teaching. Monks in the East and really old monasteries will clean the bones of their monastic brothers and they have chapels filled with the skulls of previous monks, where you go in and you meditate on death,
Wow.
on mortality. Yeah, like there's like hundreds of them. It's pretty amazing. You know, it's a very deep tradition, right? To meditate on, to recognize that we are mortal, and to have right relationship with death. So I would like to split you all into dyads and experience you and death. And Grace is like, yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And part of it came from, I shared this article, it moved me. I don't know if anyone had a chance to read it, from the New Yorker, from Peter Schendall, or whatever his name is, the art critic for the New Yorker, who's dying of some cancer, lung cancer, and wrote a really remarkable article. I recommend it. It just got me thinking about these themes a little bit, and I thought, oh, we can do that. So I'm going to split us into dyads. Just set up you and death, 10 minutes, or, you know, unless it feels done, but up to 10 minutes, just interacting. Please remember, when you are, I'm going to keep reiterating this because it's something I keep seeing slips around. When you are representing yourself, you're representing yourself. So let's say if it was me and Serena, and I'm representing myself, and Serena's representing death, Serena would report out the experience that she's having. She might move away, she might move closer, she might turn away. I might turn away, I might, you know, move back or closer. But also I report out. Yeah. Oh, it's scary to see you, or it's lovely to see you, or I don't know who you are. It feels weird. It kind of helps to forget that you're representing yourself. Just the kind of cleanness you bring when you represent anything else. Yeah? This will give you true systemic insight, rather than just, you think, oh, well, you know, I think that way about death because my grandma died when I was 2 and da-da-da. Like, forget, just put all that stuff aside, and just represent yourself and experience the representation of the other person. Move again, up to 10 minutes, but stop at 10 minutes and then switch and do it the other way. Okay? Judith, you're going to participate? You're going to take a break from packing? Yeah. Who would want to miss representing and fearing? And this is the other thing. Not only do you get to see what your systemic relationship to death is, you get to experience death in someone else's system. a little bit. And I think this will be a really interesting insight. I assume no one wants to pass, right? Even though Kelly is tired, but she's not dying. What's the head shaking?
I'll do it. It's okay.
Excellent. Good. So we're all going to be in groups. And so that means we're at 6:12. Be done by 6:35. And then take a break. And we will gather at 6:40. Okay. Regather at 6:40. Okay. So I'm going to leave you all with your time management. Okay. So I'm going to put you all in breakout rooms, and I'm going to let Zoom put us together. And you have to click on the screen to join your room. Okay, you're gonna have to unmute yourself and find some light.
Yes, I'm just gonna move to a different room so I can also have privacy because I'm now not the only one home. Okay. All righty, here I am.
Great, and I'm putting you up on a box.
Okay. Putting you up on
Okay, so for this first one, until about 25 after.
Okay.
Would you like to go first?
Wow.
Or would you like to be death?
I think I'd like to be death first.
Okay. Okay. So Judith, would you please be death?
Yes.
So what is your experience so far?
Very heavy in the legs. I'm extremely rooted. My eyes are open and I see you, but I'm not looking hard. And my breath is a bit shallow and very regular. I think I'm waiting.
So I can at best take quick glances at you.
Mm.
It is really intense to look at you. I'm looking anywhere else. You know, Leslie's, who's interested in pushing myself a little bit here, is trying to, like, you know, see if something would settle if I just look at you. And I can't tolerate it. It's really quite remarkable.
As soon as you began to speak, you became absolutely fascinating to me.
Ooh, I don't like that. I don't. So I'm going to try a sentence.
Okay.
No, that's not it. Well, I'll just put it this way. I had too much of you too soon. That feels true. That gives me a little, it's not the whole truth, but it it gives me a little bit of relief to say that.
It feels very true to me. And I also had, when you were getting so uncomfortable, I had a thought that I don't have feelings. I only experience feelings through the people that I am in contact with. And that's part of I think that's part of what's so fascinating. I don't know that I have my own feelings. Except for being very patient.
I don't have any expectations that you have any feelings. This is not about responding or reacting to feelings. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's not that. And your patience is not, it doesn't feel like good news to me. I moved because I thought, I wonder if it'd be better if like they could be sort of like off center. Doesn't really, I mean, makes my body feel a little bit better, but doesn't, I still can't really look at you much. If I forget about Leslie for a moment and just really go into the representation, the sentence is, I really don't want you looking at me.
Mm-hmm.
You keep looking at me. I don't want you to look at me.
Shall I turn my eyes somewhere else?
I think you should follow your representation. I feel better for having said that.
I'm seeing what it's like to look other places.
It's interesting. If we were in the same room, I would experiment. It's interesting, you know, that sentence, death behind your left shoulder. I'm like, I'm wondering what it'd be like to be behind death's left shoulder. Like I would try being behind you. In fact, I'm just gonna stand behind
Okay.
literally behind the webcam. And then I can actually get curious about you from this angle.
Mm-hmm.
What happens for you when I do that?
I still feel you, and I'm just gently observing what's in front of me. I definitely feel your presence, but I'm not particularly in contact. I feel very much like an observer.
This gives me a way in to be curious
Mm-hmm.
without feeling like, it's like being curious about a tiger. You don't want to push it too hard, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like, I can be curious about it and still stay safe.
Uh-huh. My arms are very heavy at my sides. I'm noticing, Judith is noticing how I can't even imagine as death reaching out for or to someone.
I think this is good for enough for me. I think I have my insight.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm stepping out.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh. Hi.
You let me know when you're ready.
All right. Now I feel a little scared. All right. Would you please represent Death? And I'm going to represent Judith.
Mm-hmm. Representing is so amazing. Like, this was the same setup as 5 minutes ago, but it's like a completely different experience. It's so funny.
Yeah, what are you feeling?
I feel enormous affection for you.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Huh.
Like two friends who are just, sitting in each other's presence and not, maybe not even doing anything. Just they're both reading by a fire or something, and then look at each other once in a while. And
I'm having tears well up. I'm having a lot of feeling well up, but I can't name it yet. Like I'm very grateful for the connection and for the affection. And knowing that, feeling very grateful that all who have gone before me have gone to such a kind and loving presence. Yeah, it's easy for me to see you. I don't want to join you yet.
I'm like, who's asking? Very Jewish voice just came up. Who asked? Yeah, there's no pressure here. There's no again, it really is like, a couple who can just be in each other's presence and don't even have to do or say anything together to there's just no pressure or requirement in any direction.
Yeah. I wasn't necessarily uncomfortable, but it's very comforting how easy it is.
Mm-hmm.
Easy your presence is. I might be done.
I don't feel any evolution happening over here. It's just going to keep being like this.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Step over here for a second.
Yeah. Okay, so we actually have quite a bit of time. If people come back earlier, that's great. I'm gonna leave the breakout room and see if I can bring you back without, I don't know if you have a leave a breakout room
Oh, okay.
thing under, or I could just bring you back. But at any rate, if people are still working, we have another 13 minutes.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go run to do a couple things, and I'll be back at 6:40.
Okay. Maybe I should simplify it, like your mom.
Just go back to what you were feeling. You're clearing a lot right now.
Okay.
Kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably. I'm like, I think it's safe. Hi. Okay. So now we have our break.
Yes.
Okay.
Two minutes. One minute. One minute. Okay, come on back, everybody. Kelly and Serena. Okay, so the first thing, it's Serena, it's not a New York Times article, it was a New Yorker article. New Yorker allows you a certain number of articles, free articles. So if it really couldn't be opened, it's possible you've used up your New Yorker articles. I don't know. Send me an email and remind me to resend it. But you know, these are media that aren't free, so I can't guarantee you can read it. And if not, then I'll, you know, I think I still have the issue somewhere. I could bring it in. It says slightly long article. So one thing I want to remind us all about, this is a really good opportunity to remind us of that conversation that got everyone so fascinated a few weeks ago around meaning in constellations and working with the inner image. When we represent death in constellations like this, it's not some abstract, absolute representation of death. It's the meaning, the systemic meaning of death in the client's system. And so, of course, that means that death probably showed up differently from system to system. It could even show up in a threatening way, not because death is threatening in the absolute, but because the meaning in the client system at this point in time is it feels that way, right? So just remember to keep working in that frame, both as a facilitator and as a client. It's really important to not like, oh my God, for me, death is mean, that's horrible. You know, just be curious. I'm like, you know, death is just death. We don't know what death is, but the meaning that's arising right now is this, okay? So having said that, let's just have a few shares and questions about what that was like.
I loved it.
Good. It met your jiggly expectations.
I've been super excited, and it was what I wanted.
Okay,
Go figure. And what was kind of cool that we were in the field was Kelly and I both said the word companionable at the same moment. And that's not a word I use, you know, companionable is not a thing I say very often, but so it really was arising for both of us when my death was present. And I felt very comforted isn't the right word, but it just settled and expanded in some way by like this feeling of living my life in the companionship and witness of my own death. It was very positive. I'm not putting words to it very well, but it felt very good.
Now, this is very interesting. This is an excellent teaching moment, because some people at this point I now know labeled the other person as my death.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas others, I know this because it was true of me and Judith, labeled it simply as death.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a subtle difference, right? Because death is something we've all got to deal with. Not just ours, but loved ones and all kinds of, encounters with death in life. So the constellation around me and death is going to be different than the constellation between me and my death.
Mm-hmm.
So that you will have this happen, because I didn't think about that when I put together this little dyad, that people could interpret it differently and therefore probably have different experiences. So I just offer this as a teaching moment. This will happen for you. You'll put out a dyad and people will interpret it, differently. Yeah. So go ahead, Grace.
Kelly and I wasn't going to bring this up. Kelly maybe will share something about it because it was when it was her constellation. But we started out with her interpretation of just death. And then it changed. We changed it consciously at a certain point to my death, and it really changed. Like it was different.
I was just sitting here thinking, just like doing like a mini, what would it have been like if it had been my death? And I went, oh, that's completely different. That's completely different. And for others, it might not be so different. That would be person to person. But yeah. Yeah, Kelly.
Since we're talking about it, I have not burped so much. Like when we started out, where I was like, where Grace was death and I was just me, I like couldn't stop burping. And it was distressing. And then when Grace is like, well, maybe am I your death or am I just death? It really did change it to like, oh, okay, wait, I can feel a little bit different about this. Like, yeah.
Yeah, at first she was in distress. I was just death. She had named me just death.
Yeah.
And she was in some distress about it and really far away. And it was, it was like hard. And then she realized, oh, wait, you were doing your death. Let's try, so then we were like, okay, now it's my death, her death. And then we both moved in and sat down and it got really intimate.
Yeah.
And then it started feeling better. And we started talking about like protection and really changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think my constellation was more me and death. Yeah. Others, and it's awesome. Like you'll do a workshop and you'll set it up and you'll think you know what you're setting up and you'll get these different reports and you'll go, oh, different interpretations. This is really interesting. And if you're watching the groups, if you have the opportunity to do that, you might make an adjustment and say, what? Oh, everybody slow down. Let's for a moment have everyone do you and your death specifically. Or you might do it or whatever. But so it gives you just know that this will happen to you.
I will say Grace was super helpful because she did say, I just feel a lot of energy moving, like when I couldn't stop burping, and that somehow brought me reassurance. So she handled it really well.
Yeah. And that's what it is. It's energy movement. Physiology, as we call it technically. And release. Others, experiences, sharings, questions.
I had with Serena at the beginning also the discussion, so is it now a death or is it my death? And I think that we said then death, right? But then I remember irgendwie when she was death, that at one point she said to me irgendwie, oh, I think I can just let you do and then irgendwie I will get you soon or something like that. And in the moment when she was saying that, then I was thinking, then she became really, then suddenly I saw her like as a human. That was interesting. So, and then she became very like this person for me.
So this was your constellation.
Yeah, my constellation, and she was death.
That's nice. Huh.
And then she became this person to me, and then I didn't feel like death anymore, and it felt like a person, because before it was I felt a little bit the flow, but yeah, I simply just think I get you soon. I don't know. It changed for me, but it was maybe also with my mind or something that it just became a form, and suddenly I said, so you are not in. I didn't feel the flow with her, which I felt at the beginning. Yeah, I don't know.
My sense is that the labeling kept shifting, and that will make for interesting systemics. Yeah, because then you're having a different system. Yeah,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's worth noticing. Serena, you were about to say something.
Well, yeah, I guess during mine, I'll talk about during mine. I was cautious at first looking at death, and then she started laughing at me, and then so then I was like, oh, okay, you're not so scary when you have a smile on your face. And then it kind of, because I was feeling a little like, yeah, cautious, scared, like, I don't know, it's like, are you gonna come get me? And but she was saying, I feel like I'm in a room and there's a door and you can come and go, and I'll show you some cool stuff in here, and then you can leave if you want to. And it was just very much like this. Oh, so we can, like, I can talk to you, I can look at you in the face, we can hang out in this place, and then I can leave again and go back to my, I don't know, it's interesting. Yeah.
I have a sense, I mean, that sounds a little bit like the monastic chapel, where you can go in and look at the skulls and meditate and then walk back out. It's got that sentence to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. It was like not scary at all. It felt, yeah, close and warm-ish.
And me representing death also felt, okay, I felt really wide and open and really not, it was really, there's so much I can show. I would love to share or show if somebody comes and asks, if somebody is interested.
Yeah, it was like we were so big, like being death, it was so big and it was so knowing, and we were talking about it also, like we wanted to get really close and like walk around. If we were in the same room, we'd want to walk around each other like a piece of art or like a sculpture, and get all the angles and just get right up in my ear and like get, just curious about this creation that, anyway, cool.
And again, Judith and I had a little bit of that, and with that sort of thing, you notice the opportunities as well as the limitations of doing this stuff on Zoom. But what we ended up doing was literally, for me, it was my constellation, and I, imagine Judith, I actually stood behind the camera. So I was behind Judith as death, and Judith as the representative said that she could feel me back there. So, the things you can try to try and get that 3D quality, the interrelational 3D quality of things. Judith, anything you want to share? You're muted.
It was very interesting to me in representing death, of being incredibly rooted and very calm and very observant. And I could see what was in front of me. I could turn my head a little bit, but there was no need to do anything, just to observe. And I wasn't even really observing until, as Leslie was reacting more to me, she became fascinating to me. And then when she represented death, it was just this incredibly warm, comforting presence that had accepted all those who went before me. And it was moving, and it felt very safe. And it's just, I said, I'm not ready to come over, and Death said, well, nobody asked you.
No, it was, who was asking?
Oh, who was asking, right? Who was asking? But it was just very meaningful and warm and comfortable.
Sweet. Yeah.
Which I don't know that I had any expectations, but I did after I represented death first. And so I had a little trepidation after having represented. And then it just was very easy right away.
Yeah. And on my end, mine was a little turbulent because it was death generally. And my parents both died rather young. The minute Grace, you mentioned my death. I went, oh, that feels okay.
Mhm.
But death generally is like, you know, for me, it's been a kind of overwhelming. And I think that the sentence I came up with was too much too soon.
Mhm.
So that was a really interesting experience. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you all. Okay, so the last topic I want to get into here, which is funny because we're on Zoom and we have no exposure to nature whatsoever, but it's nature constellation work. If you're interested in this, this is the book to get. Francesca Mason Borain's book, Returning to Membership in Earth Community, which is an anthology of essays, short essays, so you can really bite little bits and pieces. They're mostly really good essays. They vary in quality. And there's one incredible one that I think is almost required reading by Don von Kampenhout on the queer heart of the universe, because he's a gay man, and one of the earliest kind of Constellations is founded by Bert Hellinger, is a very heteronormative practice. And Don von Kampenhout was really one of the first gay leaders in the work who really sort of expanded things a bit. And so it's a really beautiful story he tells in here of doing a circle with gay men and having them really connect with what does it mean to really have the universe mirror you as a gay man? Yeah, it's really, really beautiful. And also Francesca's opening essay is also extremely good. She really knows what she's talking about. So nature constellations. What you will notice by reading this book is that people mean all kinds of different things by it. Things so different that they barely come under the same rubric. It usually means, especially when you hear someone like Francesca talking about it, it usually means constellations about nature, representing natural elements in the systems that they inhabit. So wolves and bunny rabbits and trees and land and clouds and stuff like that. And this is based on the understanding that everything has a kind of consciousness. This really helps us connect with the indigenous kind of wisdom around, the notion of not only the animals, but like the stones and the ocean being cousins. The notion of it all, like it's all family somehow. And that there are levels of consciousness all the way through everything. For me, it's mostly meant doing constellations in nature, literally in nature. For a long time, well, not a long time, 2 or 3 years, I had a picnic site up in Tilden Park up here in Berkeley. And we would just do a day of a workshop of constellations in a natural environment. And what that often meant was that elements around us were frequently getting recruited in to represent things. And that was really lovely, like just at the right moment, the crows swooping in to represent a grandfather or a loss or a grief, and or a breeze coming through. You really get open to that kind of the field providing representations for what's needed when you do that sort of thing. When you're doing constellations about nature, do watch out for projecting onto nature, anthropomorphizing it, and sentimentalizing it. It's one of the sometimes the downsides of doing this work, is that people have these ideas about nature and about Mother Earth and stuff like that, and they start stepping into representations, and it's not so much the information coming through, but their ideas about it. So that's worth having out on the lookout. Francesca talks a lot about this in her opening essay. So if you want to do constellations about nature, that first essay is really, really important. She has a lot of warnings in doing this work. For instance, the person who won't take their mother but wants to save Mother Earth instead. Yeah? That this kind of thing can really arise. Also projecting our own grief about things like climate change onto nature. She's aware that things like the earth, the rivers, the trees, if someone steps into those things and like collapses to the ground and says, I'm poisoned, she's like, that's probably not actually about the earth or the trees or the land, but about our human grief and the actual deeper consciousness of these things is more eternal and is going to outlast us at certain levels. The orders of love around nature are a little different from families. You know, when the tree falls in the forest, no one has a funeral, right? When the gazelle is eaten by the lion, no one has to go to therapy, right? And so the sense of these things is quite different in nature. And so you have to be you've got to work with your representatives in order to get really honest representations when you're dealing with nature representations. If you do constellations in nature, whether they are about nature or not, but you do it in nature, I found these very, very valuable. People really liked them. The first thing, of course, is that nature is regulating. We had that topic at the last residency, dysregulation and regulation. We know a good hike, walking along a seashore is regulating. So the influence of nature around us is a regulating force, and that's extremely useful, right? When you're doing a constellation and people are coming in with dysregulation. You also have a different relationship with containers. It's really interesting to help people do that a little bit differently because you don't have four walls. And so I often talk about, so we're holding the container, then the picnic area is the container, our intention is the container. But you may notice if you sort of spread out your awareness, just notice that the universe is our container. Like we always have a container we can feel, and people go, oh, that's a really nice feeling. Yeah. So it's a different relationship with containers for the work, but you really do have to be kind of focused on that. I mean, like when I do these constellations at this picnic area, I'm a little anal about perfect circles and stuff like that. You got to get over that stuff because there are like gopher holes and we're constantly moving the circle because the shade is moving, and either it's a really hot day and we need more shade, or it's a really cold day and we want to be in the sun. So all of a sudden the fog comes in at 12. It's a different relationship with our container, and you need to help people sort of be with that. The last thing I noticed that's really, really nice, I said about, when the tree falls, no one goes off to see a therapist. Nature is fundamentally in rapport with itself, is the way I like to put it. It's not in conflict with itself. And so when we are in the presence of nature, we kind of, it models something for us. And we become more in rapport with ourselves and our problems. And my experience at the end of a day of doing constellations in nature is that people leave not needing to fix and change things so much, and more with rapport with how it is, which is extremely useful for, kind of having a happy life. Because if we have to wait for everything to get change and get better, right, then we can't be happy, right? But if we can be more with rapport with how it is, the funny thing is the more we have rapport with how it is, the more it makes energy for things changing, which is a very interesting paradox. Yeah. So it tends to things stay in primary emotions a lot more easily. It's kind of magical. I would do it more often, but I started having trouble enrolling for it, and they were kind of a bit of work. So I went on hiatus for a little while. So nature constellations, I recommend them. It can be a little tricky if someone with a really strong trauma constellation issue. You might want an enclosed garden or something like that, something that's got a little bit of a, so you want to match the work to the space. But I've done some hairy stuff out in the picnic area, and it's been fabulous. I want to give a couple of examples of nature getting recruited, or even just the environment getting recruited in various ways. I first experienced nature constellations down in San Diego at Silver Lake Ranch, which is run by Sarah Fancy. She does horse constellations. Anna, you should check her out. Check out Sarah Fancy's work at Silver Horse Ranch, excuse me. She doesn't really do horse constellations. She more does nature constellations, and it includes horses. That was more my sense of it. But I remember at one point, we were like in this corral, and we were doing a constellation, and I was representing the client's father, who had been a doctor, who had a lot of care and love for the patients and not so much for his own children, including the client. And so that was kind of showing up, and the client was, and all of a sudden, the facilitator had these two ranchy dogs who were constantly running everywhere. They were run dogs. Very happy dogs to be living out, on the ranch. And they were doing that in the background, and all of a sudden, one of the dogs, like, ran into one of the tent poles or something. And we heard this yelp, this extreme dog yelp. And I said, hey, I think the dog's hurt. I really think we should take a moment and go help the dog. The client said, that's my father right there. More attention on the hurt dog than on me. And I thought I was just being Leslie, noticing the hurt dog, but I realized that this was the father, and the dog had been recruited by the constellation to play this role, and it turned out the dog was fine, right? So I was just blown away by that. And the dog kept on getting recruited into roles. This dog loved representing. At one point, the dog just kind of walked into the middle, running like crazy all the time. And then all of a sudden he comes in and lays down in the middle. And I went, that's the dead baby. And everyone went, oh my God, the dead child in the family. So the other example I really, really love, it's from when I was doing them up in Tilden. I sent people off into small groups, and I may have told you this story before because it's such a great story. But so a group went off in 3, they set something up around someone's digestive issues. And sort of unbeknownst, they were sort of settled on an informal trail, not a real trail, but that's where they were. And 2 people came walking along to go down to Lake Anza, and they walked straight through the middle of this constellation. And everyone in the constellation, this little group of 3 went, what the we're doing something here. Can you go around? Come on. And then 5 minutes later, they came back the other way. And again, walked straight through the constellation. And again, they're like, what the hell? Can't you see we're doing something here? I mean, come on. And then all of a sudden the client went, yeah, but I'm feeling better. So somehow this couple who were just going about their day were representing something resourceful and cleansing in the client's system. And they walked straight through it twice. So if you sort of have an open mind about these things, yeah. And I've just seen all kinds of things get recruited into the constellation. So this is fun. This can be fun. No reason why it can't be fun. Okay. Any questions about nature constellations?
I'm just wondering, when people are passing by, are they people who are just standing there, irgendwie, and how is it, or how do people react usually? So they just...
Well, I mean, I would choose a picnic area that was, as secluded as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in the East Bay Regional Park System. There were people who were kind of, around a little bit. And it really wasn't uncommon, that we'd be dealing with some heartbreaking childhood thing, and then we'd see the parents playing with their kids right up the hill and go, oh, that's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
People who were around us, they were just passing by. They were just, oh, that's a group of people doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Every once in a while, people will come along and say, can we picnic here with you? And we're like, no, I reserved this spot. There are other places, I'm sorry. But people would be passing by, and it wasn't a problem. Obviously, you don't want to be, if you're going to do a day of constellations, you don't want to be setting yourself up in a high traffic area. You want a little privacy, or as much as you can arrange for.
Mm-hmm.
But try it. It's fun.
What kind of, are there specific, I'm wondering what you would choose to constellate in nature.
Well, you can constellate anything. I mean,
right? Okay.
I mean, we did, normal group constellations. People would volunteer. I also did a bunch of little dyads, just to get people warmed up. I would send them out into groups of like 2 or 3, and set up a problem, and then be on the lookout for what seems to be a resource or a strength for the problem here in the system around you. And I'd send them off into groups of 2, and they would agree, they'd go to a beeline to a tree, and they're like, I don't know what this tree is, but it feels really good. It feels really helpful, and it would represent some resource in the family system for the problem. Sometimes it was very explicit. Sometimes it was more mysterious. Like, I don't know what it represents, but it feels good. Oh, I'm relaxing around this problem. This is great. I would do things like, there's a really nice one I got from one of the conferences, is you and your spirit animal.
Oh.
It's really nice. So I'd send them off into dyads. You and your heart is a good one for that environment. But anything you can do in a room with 4 walls, you can do in I would do. If sometimes my groups got really small, like it'd be 3 or 4 or 5 people, and I'd say, okay, guys, everybody gets an individual constellation today. And I would just do individual constellations for people on an issue. Just sort of classic constellations. Yeah. But with this nice added thing of things showing up.
Yeah, it's like you get a little more field access.
Yeah, exactly. And again, with this added thing of nature being in rapport with itself. So there's a way in which that I invariably would work on the clients who would just find themselves more welcoming and less pushy and less needy and more ready to allow things to be, and just usually made constellations just easier. Because that sort of, I got to have it a certain way, would just sort of relax a bit. And then they get a lot more. They receive a lot more. It's quite nice. Yeah. And I wish I had my office someplace with like a courtyard or something where we could do that. But you go down to the tent city. Okay, so here's what I would like to do. With some attention to anyone who perhaps has not had a constellation in a Zoom class. And I'm not keeping track, so I don't know who you are. But if anyone has, something for a pet or your plants or a piece of land, people will often do these nature constellations around land use issues. Superfund sites or a developer, or they're trying to build something and they're running into obstacles, and dealing with environmental issues in their community is something that this gets used for. If anyone has something like that in your life, about a piece of land or a pet who's having a problem, or plants that refuse to thrive, or a nearby land issue, land problem. Yeah, Anna.
No land, but we adopted our dog, I think now 9 months ago, something. And he got better, but he still has that's the first dog that sometimes had some aggressions problems. I don't know if you call it that way, but it's just, so he bit me twice, that I actually was bleeding, and once my daughter, and we had a time that we were, that I was pretty much thinking of taking him back or whatever. So, and so it got much better, but still, I would be just really, what he really needs is, I'm just wondering what he went through in his life. And I think for him, because usually we have friends with dogs who are coming over to visit. There's no way that anybody could come and bring their dog in our house now. Because he is just.
How old was he when he was adopted?
The vet was thinking between 2 and 3 years old.
And you got him from a shelter?
Yeah.
And what was he, a stray?
Yeah, but I think he looked pretty wild.
Okay.
You give him for adoption, then you have to pay a fee.
Right.
So we didn't get any history.
Okay.
About him or anything.
Okay. So we would like some relief for your pup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's his name?
George.
Do you have any other pets in the home?
No.
And who else is in the home?
Living is my youngest daughter, Fiona, and my husband, Chris.
Okay.
But and my older children are coming over a lot. And Ava, she's my oldest daughter. She was bitten by him as well. Yep.
Sorry, I wasn't listening carefully. I've got Fiona, Chris, and what's the dog's name?
George. And then there is Anno and Ava, who are not living in our house anymore, but they're coming over a lot. And actually, he was what we did with our old dog, that he lived in 2 houses. Our old dog, we switched between Anno and Ava living together. So we switched in when we were gone over the weekend, so that our old dogs were going to them and were spending a week with them or something like that. That is also not possible with him.
Okay. Okay, we'll just start there. We'll keep it simple. So let's just start out. Anna, would you choose someone to represent you and someone to represent George?
Kelly, would you represent me? And Grace, would you represent George? Thank you.
So Anna, how are you, please? Yeah, both you and Grace need to unmute yourselves.
I kind of want to look closely at George. Maybe get a little closer. But I kind of want to get down on George's level too. Like, I don't want to feel.
I mean, if you want to sit in a chair to kind of represent that, feel free.
Okay. Okay. George.
So George, how are you?
I feel very high energy and a bit on edge. I'm looking everywhere. Yeah, I'm on edge.
You see Anna.
Kind of. Like, I'm busy looking a lot of places, but that's one place.
And what's the looking around? Is it being on alert and looking for danger, or is it looking for a squirrel that needs chasing, or?
I'm confused. I'd feel confused. It's kind of like I'm looking for clues, like what's going to happen next? What am I supposed to do? What's going on? I'm pretty high energy, like inside things are moving really fast.
I feel very calm. But I'm not quite sure what to do. I kind of almost want to like hug him.
Serena, I want to see if this is a relevant role. It may not be given Anna's guess, but I want to confirm one way or the other. If there is one, could you please represent the previous owner? You'll probably get a sense, everyone will get a sense pretty quickly if there is such a one. So George, how is it to look at the one Serena's representing?
Don't want to look at that one. I don't feel like terrified. I just feel more nervous.
And previous owner, how are you?
I think I'm mean and scary. Like I'm having like kind of like not warm.
Yeah, so I'm going to invite you to, because we all have understandable judgments about abusive dog owners, kind of put all that aside for a moment and just as cleanly as possible, the non-warmth, what is it like to look at George?
Oh man, like he won't stop moving. Yeah, like kind of edgy.
Yeah.
Like it heightens whatever's going on here. I think it's like an irritation.
Yeah. And George, how is that for you?
Yeah, I feel more agitated and nervous. Like I said, it doesn't feel scary like abuse. It feels more like, I don't know what's going to happen next. Like things are really unpredictable. I don't know what's going to go on. Kind of like I really, really, really want to do the right thing, but I just have no idea.
Yeah.
There's also this little like, this person might disappear at any minute. Of like, I need to really keep this person in my eye.
Me or
I'm
me,
focused.
Anna?
It's like the old owner. I almost have a feeling like they could just disappear. I have to watch them because they could just be gone.
So previous owner, can you just look at George and say, I was not the right one for you.
I was not the right one for you.
It's just like sent shivers up my spine, and I feel like boom, like a rod just came in. I'm not nervous, but I'm sad.
Yeah. Serena, does your role have access to enough sort of underneath the secondary levels to be able to say something like, you're a good dog. There's a better place for you than with me, or something like that?
I feel very cold and unemotional, so I can say there's a better place for you.
Yeah. You need someone warmer than me.
Yeah, you need someone warmer than me.
Yes.
And then I'm just going to represent, I don't know, just kind of the facilitator. I'm just going to look at George and say, George, you were a small dog. You needed something when you were little.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How's that for you, George, to have that acknowledged?
Yeah, this is all very settling, and it brings me to a sadness that feels real.
Yeah. So could the previous owner and Anna look at each other? And George, you just see your previous and your current owners looking at each other. You can kind of be a bystander for a sec. And previous owner, could you just look at Anna and say, he's yours now.
He's yours now.
I was not the right one for him.
I was not the right one for him.
Is that okay to say?
Yeah, I wanted to say something like he didn't belong to me, but then I thought I'd just listen to you.
That's really nice. I think there's something in there around, I think I mentioned to you guys last time that really beautiful article about what dogs are brilliant at evolutionarily is they bond to anything. They bond to people, they'll bond to deer, they'll bond to an elephant, they'll bond to a cat. They're bonding machines. And what I hear the previous owner saying is that he is less capable of bonding than George was.
I felt like I belonged to him or her.
Yeah. Can you say that to your previous owner, please?
I belong to you.
So, and can you say, previous owner, you do belonging better than I do?
Yeah, you do belonging better than I do.
It's hard for me to bond.
It's hard for me to bond.
And you can leave that with me.
And you can leave that with me.
Is that okay, previous owner? Yeah. So Anna, can you look at the previous owner and just with respect, just say to the previous owner, you were first.
You were first.
And then say to George, I see your first owner.
George, I see your first owner.
This is actually making me cry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like in dog language, I never fell out of love with my first owner.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you say again to your first one, I belong to you?
I belong to you.
And I said that in past tense. I don't know if you did.
I belonged to you.
Yeah. Which for a dog means, and you can say this, I loved you.
I loved you.
Yeah. Because dogs will love even mean owners, right? And previous owner, can you just say to George, thank you? Just do that on the record. Boy, I couldn't hear that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And can you say, George, you deserve to have someone who can love you back?
Yeah. George, you deserve to have someone who can love you back.
I can't do that.
I can't do that.
Yeah. Leave that with me.
Leave that with me.
And then can you look and say, Anna owns you now?
Anna owns you now.
And point over to Anna, whoever that is. Yeah. And I know Zoom has the squares in weird places. Everybody's squares are in different places, but how's that for you, George?
I was feeling hungry to hear her say, instead of Anna owns me now, I wanted to hear her say, you belong with Anna.
You belong with Anna.
My tail's wagging.
So George, can you look at Anna and say, I've been confused?
I have been confused.
I understand that you've been confused.
I see your previous owner.
I see your previous owner.
And that you loved that one.
And that you loved that one a lot.
And you don't have to stop loving that one.
And you don't have to stop loving that one.
It was a little tail wag.
Tail's wagging.
And you can love us too.
And you can love us too.
I feel relief.
And can you just say, I got you want to share something else, but I want to say one thing. And we really want to make a home for you.
And we really want to make a home for you. I have to say, I'm feeling a little diffident.
How so?
I just my brain keeps going back to the bite, and my children getting bit.
Of course. Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
It's more like I really want to like embrace George, but there's also kind of like I don't know.
Yeah. How do you feel, George, when you hear that?
I don't even know what you're talking about. Not that I don't remember biting anybody, but just this isn't making sense.
What's this?
In my George mind, I'm not seeing the bite as an offense or insult or anything.
What do you see it as?
There was just so much happening. I'm so confused. I was so confused.
Yeah.
It was just reflex.
Yeah.
I don't want it to happen again.
Yeah, hold off on that.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's all right. I acknowledge it, and I'm glad you brought it in because I was thinking it too, and it's important. I just want to find the right approach.
I want him to feel safe enough that it doesn't happen again.
Real Anna,
Mm-hmm.
where are you at on owning George? You said for a little while you were thinking like, I don't know about this. Are you committed now?
Yes, yes, we are. And also, fairness to him, it didn't come out of nothing. It was only that he had something, one thing he stole something out of the trash and I wanted to take it away and I was not aware that I can't do that with him.
Yeah.
No, with the old dogs, that was never a problem. And now now I know it, and now we, now I say really strong, leave it, and then he leaves it.
Yeah.
And then that was, and the second one was also a very stressful situation that he was running on the street, and I was trying to get him. And then he had something on the street he was licking at. And then I took him from the back. And that was also a situation that he was thinking, I'm taking him away from food or something like that.
I understand.
So it was, it had a reason. And I was also, now I know, And it's just, and right after that, he's laying down and you could feel really that he's totally regretting it. It's like a click in his
Yeah, yeah. So, Kelly, can you find this in the roll and let me know if you can find it? If you can't, tell me. But I just want to reflect what Anna just said, which is, George, I'm committed.
George, I'm committed.
Is that true?
Yeah, I'm very committed.
Excellent. George, how is that for you?
It's all kind of new. Like, I'm just realizing I belong here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just getting my fuzzy head wrapped around that.
We can give you time.
So, George, can you do the classic, really?
Yeah, really?
Yeah. Yes, you really do belong here.
Well, say, I'm really committed.
I'm really committed. I am really committed.
We're really committed.
Really, really committed. You belong here with us.
That feels, the most important part for me is I can still love my last person and belong to you.
Yeah, we don't want to take away that love you have for that other person.
So just simply say, I see your previous owner.
I see your previous owner.
You can love us both.
You can love us both.
I like that. Because I love you and you and you and you and you and you and you.
So I think I'm going to leave it here because Anna has been clear about her commitment. And in terms of my goal for her and for George is that evolving safety that helps them relax and not react to stuff with that sense of, oh, something's getting taken away and the confusion and all that stuff. So let's just see if this helps George going forward. So I think I'm going to leave it here. Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
So what I was trying to do there with a little bit of my knowledge of dog psychology from watching those, dog shows and stuff, is working with the orders of love for dogs, which are a little different than the orders of love for people. And so, that bit about bonding, which is just different for dogs than it is for people. And so how the previous owner showed up with this, I don't know what you're talking about, belonging, right? And the mismatch between George and the previous owner was kind of my way in, and wanting to address that somehow for George so he can be okay. So that's that's what that's what I did. Cats are a little different. So you gotta kind of work within cats. Bonding is also important for cats, by the way. I don't want to imply it isn't. They do definitely bond, but it'll just show up differently. And there can be different issues. Like if Anna had brought a dog into a household, this is why I asked if there were other pets in the house. Sometimes what we're running into is seniority with pets in the house. Who came first, who came second. If a new cat's brought into a household, sometimes they'll fight really, really badly. And you do a constellation that kind of clarifies the seniority of the previous cat. So it's a simple orders of love thing. And the new cat has to say to the cat who was there first, say, you came first, I come second. And it can often calm things down. Or you can find out that they're sick, an animal's sick. Previous owners, what I was trying, by the way, when I brought in Serena as the possible previous owner, I wasn't sure if the issue was a previous owner or if it was that George was used to living in the wild,
Mm.
and that was the source of the confusion. So that's what I wanted to check out, and it seemed really clear pretty quickly that there was a previous owner. I figured that if there was no resonance around that representation, then I would go with trying to work with helping George understand the difference between, you know, running around in the wild versus, you know, belonging with humans. So I didn't know which it was going to be. Yeah, so Dupac Constellations. This is great. Thank you.
Can I just say, that was unexpectedly amazing for me. As a person with my full share of attachment, you know, weirdness, to stand in the place of a being who just loves, and it doesn't matter if you love me back, and I don't care if I deserve it or not. Like, it's just pure, straight up bonding. That was just to experience a little piece of that. Like, oh, that's so uncomplicated. That was really sweet.
Awesome. That's really nice. Yeah, stepping into these things, stepping into mountains or rivers, or you get little bits of consciousness that are useful for humans. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so let me just do a little bit of housekeeping here, and then we'll bring it to a close. So the next residency, January 30th to February 2nd. Schedule and use your coaching calls. I love you all, but this makes me cranky. So please schedule and use your coaching calls. The intensive, which some of you went to the webinar today for, the super early bird has been extended to February 5th. And so an opportunity to continue to think about that. Just a few singles left if you're thinking about residency, and of course commuting is an option. If anyone has changed their mind about the advanced class, please let me know. If any of you is thinking more seriously about it. I want to ask a question because enrollment has been slow, so I'm trying to be creative. How many people would be interested if it were only the first residency, just the first 4 days? Kelly's already on the record as being interested in that because she's going to burn to Germany for the second one.
What was the date for the for that? Do you know what the date was?
I have to look it up.
The first residency?
Uh-huh.
March 5th through the 8th. And again, you can look this all up, but if you could make it, does that sound intriguing?
I can do it. This is my crazy time.
Yeah. No, doesn't change anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Okie dokies. I can check in with Judith and with Dinka another time about that. Okay, so today we looked at we started talking a bit about past life constellations. That's right. And then we talked about oh my God, look at my notes. It was so long ago. Ritual constellations. And we talked about using transpersonal elements in constellations and nature constellations. So as you remember all that, just take a moment. What's your takeaway for today?
The elements are really important, I think. Understand, like, just I like getting a better sense of what that actually means. You know, like as far as like, sorry. like transpersonal, like that whole idea of, okay, this isn't like something we're not talking about things that are in our heritage or like person to person. It's like these are bigger things that influence us, and kind of considering what those would be and how they can play into constellations.
Okay. Thank you. What other takeaways do we have? I think Grace's is being a dog and being free to bond.
I feel silly saying that, but it really is like that made
No,
a big
it isn't.
impact on me.
This is why representing is so awesome.
Yeah, like I got a whole new experience of attachment than I normally have.
By the way, you also got in there, which is relevant to humans, the confusions when attachment's supposed to be happening and taking place naturally and normally, and it isn't. And it creates this disability, this sort of consciousness disability. Like, what? It's that fuzziness that the humans have that too when they have an attachment trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also relevant. Yeah, that confusion, but in a purer form. Yeah. Oh, and we also did the death dyads.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
Guys, that was great.
I'm in a dog and death tonight. That's
The dog has gone backwards. Yeah, so other takeaways.
I appreciate the constellation, of course, and I also like the idea of the out. What comes in nature-wise. Yeah, and I'm also. I liked also when you were saying that it's for him that it's so hard, even with the dying, was when you were saying with the rivers and everything. So as a representative, seeing it from that human side and the interpretation of that. So I'm really curious about that as well. To just feel, I'm curious to represent things like that. So just, I want to feel how nature feels, actually. That makes me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing because we'll never, without self-consciousness, God knows we don't know, but it's through a human filter still, but without projecting anything on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like representing a baby. A baby doesn't know what it's experiencing, but we can step into the baby and report out in some way. It's like translating from another language into human adult. You know, translating river into human adult language.
I like the part where you said the key strength of constellations is dealing with specific entanglements. And then I feel actually like the George dog example was a really great example of that.
Yeah.
Like this is just a matter of belonging and like feeling like in the right place.
Serena or Judith, what are your takeaways as we bring this to a close?
I'm working with self-rapport right now and trying not to be triggered by things that happened.
Like what?
Well, like being the heartless, I don't know. Like I really didn't feel anything in that role. And I also don't want to have pets, and so I'm like, is there something, like maybe I do have some sort of bonding. Yeah, I'm triggered. So I'm trying to, good.
So the most important thing right now, could you look at whoever the previous owner is on the Kelly, just represent, you don't have to move, just represent be the previous owner. And Serena, this is respect for who you represent. Could you bow to that one and leave it with that one? So Serena, yeah, no, Serena, yeah, there you go. No, you just sit there, Kelly. Okay. Yeah. And then we have a really magical move. I don't think I've showed this one to people before. And Kelly, you continue to represent that previous owner. This is a really sophisticated, high-level move, Serena. It's me, you, you. Me, you, you. Yeah. And then whatever's left over after that is something that's useful for you to notice for you. Yeah. Including, which is something I've been known to do, including if you're getting yourself into a shame spiral, just notice, I'm getting myself into a shame spiral. That's really interesting. Yeah. And it's very interesting little constellation you just started. I don't know what it is, but you just started a constellation. And you might let yourself put it aside until we can attend to it more at another time. You and I have a gabillion sessions coming up.
It's because I scheduled them. That's all of them.
I know. Yeah. So you might just say, you know what, this thing has come up. Hello. And just say, I'm not ignoring it. I'm not suppressing it. But not now. I'll look at it later. Yeah.
I see you tomorrow.
There you go. There you go. And see what you dream about tonight. Yeah. Okay. Judith, are you out there packing? Do you want to say goodbye? Okay, we love you. Have a good trip.
Bye.
Okay, guys, have a good night. Good to see you. I'll see you tomorrow, Serena. And some of you I will see for the business Zoom 1 week from tonight. And others in various coaching sessions here and there. Please make your appointments if you have not yet. And definitely everybody at the end of the month.
Oh, can I ask a quick question, Leslie?
Yeah,
If we wanted to watch the webinar, because I couldn't do it today, is it going to be online somewhere?
Yeah, I could share the link with you, but I'm going to have to leave it in your hands to email me and ask for that, okay?
I will. Thank you.
Can you share it with me as well? I will send you an email.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.